Welcome one and all to Werewolf the podcast, and here we are again, episode 171. When is this going to end, you may ask? I don't know. I really don't. We're in medieval times for the last part of our dragon story. If you'd like to support the show, do so. There's loads of ways you can do it. You can come and join the Facebook group. You can go to X and find us there as the Werewolf Story, and on Instagram and other things. It's so exciting. You can also follow us, and you can share us, and you can comment on us, and you can say whatever you want. We don't mind. You know, you might hate us, you might like us, you might love us, but you know what? We always love you. I killed that dragon. I won that fated fleece. Lord Percy of Northumberland, the greatest knight there's ever been. Eyes of fire looked into eyes full of fear. We stood, Fen and I, looking at the cowering Count caught on his throne-like chair. He was now not the brave man of a few moments ago. He was sitting in his own feces. I have to admit that we had a fine form to cause such a situation, and I had just appeared in the man's vaulted hall from nowhere. I had. We are the monster. Fenrir, my wolf soul posit, and I have become the beast. There are times when it is sadly necessary to release us into the world, and this was one of those beastly times. The court had run from their positions around the Count at my appearance. His entire retinue had left him. The Count had no one to count upon now. No one! His crossbowmen had run, and his men had run. Only 3 knights in his company were still left at his side, but it looked like they would rather be anywhere else than here today. And who can blame them? For death itself gazed upon them in a blind fury. They had no idea if they wanted to have their hands on their swords or not. Fear rolled off them, and that fear was almost as pervasive to my nose as was the shit in the Lord's breeches. Gervais drunkenly clambered from below the table to my left. As he dragged himself to his feet, he smiled at the Count, whose eyes flashed towards him. Gervais nodded at the man as he placed his empty cup on the table and looked around him for something to fill it with. Gervais had hidden upon my appearance, not from fear, but from knowledge that the world, with me as my werewolf in it, is a messy world. He was well aware that parts of people and people's parts tend to fly about when the wolf does his work. After belching loudly and dusting himself down, he let his eyes wander the tabletop in search of something. On finding a large wine jug, he hefted it to find it full and smiled deeply at this. Most everything else on the table was broken or cast aside willy-nilly. On finding the jug, he took on the aspect of a naughty child as he threw his cup over his shoulder with a grin. It smashed with a satisfying sound. He faked a wince, giggled at the sound, and took several large gulps from the vessel he held until satisfied. He was a one for the wine, was our Gervais. He said, in appreciation of his sup.
I have to say, it's a fine wine, my fine fellow,
he said, speaking to the Count as he paused for another drink.
Well, you did serve fine wine before. This night, this night's brought that night.
He said, this time with a bit of sadness in his tone, shaking his head in disappointment and pointing towards us as the Wolfman.
But I hasten to add, hasten to add, I did warn you.
He announced to the silent room before wiping his mouth on his sleeve.
I don't know why. Why does no one ever believe me? Is it 'cause I drink a little bit?
He asked the Count, candidly. The Count was looking at him open-mouthed as he talked, not really knowing what was going on. This conversation seemed somewhat strange with the gigantic black beast standing over him.
You definitely don't want to upset our William here, do you?
He reminded, and drank again.
That's a bloody fine vintage you have there. Anyway, what? You don't want to piss off our William, do you? You just do not, because this kind of thing happens, and then by the grace of God and all his angels, the perpetrator's world becomes extremely complicated. Complicated, yes.
He laughed at what he thought was his own wit.
Yes. Complicated is a very good description of what happens.
He moved around the table he'd been standing at and came forward to join me with the Count at the dais. He took his time. He enjoyed taking his time, and it did nothing to reduce the tension in the situation. At the Count's table, he paused and smiled. His nostrils suddenly flared at the smell of shit as it struck him. So he covered his nose with a nod at the Count and stepped away a couple of yards before turning back to him to continue his monologue. Holding his snout, he wafted the air with the jug-filled hand, slightly slopping its contained wine. It ran down the sides of the earthenware vessel where it joined the puddles of red sticky fluid that had already stained the floor and wet his boots.
Oh, don't be concerned about that,
he told the Count. The Count looked puzzled at this remark and the dripping wine.
I mean, the, shitting yourself thing. I've been known to do some, shit myself when I'm drunk, to be honest.
He seemed to consider this for a second.
After the fourth or fifth time, it sort of, sadly becomes kind of, normal.
He told the man, trying to reassure the dirtied lord.
Oh, I realize you're not drunk,
he said.
but...
He motioned towards the giant wolfman stood over the noble.
But I probably think I would have, sort of done the same thing if he'd been angry with me as well, so don't worry too much.
He whispered. I, as the wolfman, turned to Gervais and attempted a smile. Gervais nodded at me, still holding his nose.
You see, I definitely felt a twitch down there, and he's my friend.
The knight laughed, continuing to talk to the terrified nobleman.
Anyway, this gets us no further. Percy!
Gervais shouted at a turned-over table which had once seated the mighty, renowned Lord of Northumberland himself. Nothing happened.
Percy!
He repeated, a little more tersely. Percy leapt to his feet behind the table as though he'd been standing there all along and not hiding at all.
Yes, Gervais, how can I help you?
The man said, guilt oozing from him.
Have you checked the room and its perimeter to make sure we are secure in here, Percy?
Gervais asked the man, although he knew for sure that he'd been hiding and probably had his eyes closed the whole time as he did so. The confused Percy scratched his head and looked around the room briefly.
Yes, Gervais?
he said, with no actual conviction of it being true.
Oh, good, Percy. It's good to know that we have the Lord of Northumberland here to protect us. Do you have the beautiful Em in your safe hands, protecting her from all these dangers in this place? Only a brave knight as yourself could do that, sir.
Percy looked to his left and then to his right. Em was not there, so he opened his mouth to tell Gervais no, when Welly popped up next to him, holding the girl.
He does, sir?
Affirmed Welly. Percy looked at the boy, utterly bewildered.
Do I?
He asked, then in the same breath confirmed he did.
Oh, yes, of course I do, by all that is good.
He announced, patting the crying girl on her head, taking up the tone associated with bravery.
I, Percy, Lord of Northumberland, have placed my life on the veritable line to make sure that she and Welly are safe.
He lied, a broad smile crossing his features. Gervais looked at Welly briefly and winked. Welly shrugged in response and withheld a laugh that wanted to escape his lips but found no way to do so.
Well done, sir. Well done, sir. Of course you have.
Gervais complimented Percy.
Ah, you see, sir. Even though you treat us as you do, firstly trying to besmirch our characters and belittle us in front of your court. Secondly, trying to kill one of our number. We, in contrast, as godly men, look to your daughter's safety at this very moment.
He carefully and warily patted my black-pelted back from an uncomfortable distance before wiping his hand on his breeches. I was covered in, aftermath, as it were.
We've managed to save her from this, situation's distress.
It was a question for himself whether distress was the right word. Distress certainly did not seem enough for what had happened.
Saving her in this moment of,
He paused and studied the ceiling, thinking.
No, distress won't do. In this moment of,
He struggled for the words he wanted.
Percy, you're the poet.
He said as he turned to Percy with hope.
Do you have a word for this, by any chance?
He said, presenting the room with a wave of his jug-filled hand. Percy looked at the room in confusion. He mouthed several describing words, disqualifying them before he chose his best.
The shit.
He eventually chose. Gervais winced, but shrugged. It was ultimately correct.
I don't think the Count does, need to be reminded of the shit he is in, methinks.
He smiled, registering his joke only after it had been made. Oh, how we laughed at Gervais' accidental witticisms. The Count du Périgord. What do I do? What do I do? I am sat before this best of hell as it stares at me. The very pits of hell burn from those eyes. Is this to be my end? My beautiful daughter is being held by them, not as hostage. She is not being openly threatened. But I must do something. I must. These men are having fun at my displeasure, in my own coat. They think they are funny. They believe that they have me beaten. I will not lose my pride or my daughter this day. I believe these cards would and could deflower her in front of me, just to torture me. Pah! godly men that say they are not. I would do anything to save my little M. But what do I tell them? How could I save her? The golden flesh was not meant to offer them in the first place. It was made for the king. It was he who paid my goldsmiths. I add that they are the finest goldsmiths in all these lands of the earth to make such a gift for such a king. My wonderful goldsmiths. Our king sees that flesh as a symbol of his authority and kingship. He loves that flesh. He loves that ancient story. Chrysamolus, the winged ram, was sacrificed to Zeus by Phrixus, and its flesh was given to King Aertes before it was stolen by Jason. But it is gone. It is gone from my coat. It is on its way north. I do not have it. What could I do? They should not have killed that worm. It was supposed to be an impossible task.
We wait for you to bring us the fleece, Lord.
The large blonde gnat walks forwards towards me. Oh, he is so proud, this gnat. Drunk, oui, but proud.
For it was a promise, and it is the cost of saving your daughter and your fiefdom from the worm. The worm, the worm.
It tells me. How dare he? How dare he? I feel the anger of the situation bloom in my chest. I am the lord of this place. I am the man who should be listened to here, and they should serve me. They think of thee, my old friend, and their lord would not allow them to do so this to me if he were here. Oh, I will tell him. I will make war on him and his for this. I think I will give you gold instead. I tell the man. I ignore the thing that stands before me now, for my daughter's sake. I know no fear for her.
No, sir,
Shouts Gervais.
no. Give us what you damn well promised us.
Shout this dog. Yes, a dog. He is a brigand, meaning to steal from me. If he does not recognize my authority, then he is a thief. I offer him gold, do I not? Oh, how the anger builds in me. I look to my knights, the remaining 3 brave knights that stand around me. I meet their eyes in turn. Each turns their eyes away from me. I cannot believe it. The cowards! The bloody cowards! What pathetic fools are they! When this is over, I will enjoy their pathetic request for leniency as I rack and torture them! I will give them no leave and no mercy! They will die in horrible agony at my behest! Oh? But what is this I spy? Oh, how God serves me at this moment. I must be the righteous. A crossbow is abandoned on the table within a hand's grasp. Yes, a crossbow. I will shoot this beast through the heart and then attack the knight at its death. I will kill them and then have their heads as a reminder of this moment. Nothing can beat me in my righteous fury, not even this demon. The angels will witness this and bring me much aid. My knights may gain some bravery from my actions. I will risk all for my aim. Of course, she is my beautiful daughter. I will look again at my men. The mealy-mouthed Montagna is turned away. He pontificates about the flesh. He is enjoying his words in his own drunkenness. I do not care about the drivel that passes his lips. Having now the attention of my knights, I nod towards the bow and secretly point at myself as the best as a moment of distraction, looking at my not-so-noble protectors. Warning them without words not to move, they look back and shake their heads in admonishment of me. They try to order me not to do it with their eyes. I cannot believe it. The cowards. We will see, foul creature. We will see. I will at the very least take you before this day ends. For me. And as the thought settles in my brave heart, I lunge.
It is I, Lord Percy, brave protector of Northumberland. And again, I bravely protect the Count's daughter. Apparently. Welly stands with her. She has doe eyes for him and seems quite content to be held in his arms. She shows no fear of the beast before her father. She only has eyes for young, pimply Welly. Gervais is, as usual, spouting some drunken nonsense, demanding the fleece as payment for our work. William stands there, a terrifying thing that, if I let myself loiter on, makes my bowels churn. No, not with fear, but with, bravery? That can be a thing, can it not? Bowel-churning bravery. The Count suddenly lunges. He picks up a crossbow some distance to his left and aims it as he falls to the table. The bow launches its quarrel at the beast. The wolfman flinches at the Count's movement, but it is not quick enough to avoid the shot. It enters William's... Yes, William. It pierces William's shoulder, and the werewolfy William thing reels a little as it tears through his flesh. He roars in pain, and I shiver in fear. No, not fear. At his, no, not at his roar, but at his pain. That's it. I shiver at his pain, his possible death. The boat passes through Werewolf's shoulder and wings its way towards us. I leap bravely to the floor behind the protection of Welly and M, who I throw down before me. After a few moments ripping and smashing and tearing from somewhere in the room, silence falls. I slowly and warily stand to see Gervais covered in blood and guts. He does not look impressed as he wipes one eye, then the other, and then fishes a single ear from the wine jug he holds. His face holds disgust at the ear he holds in his hand, and he looks at the bloody wolfman in disapproval at the deflowering of his drink. The Count is over there, and there is a bit of him over there, and in fact it is hard to separate him from the parts of his knights that cover the tables over there, the tables over there, the walls, the sconces, and the most unhappy Gervais. The fight, well, it seems over. The facts are that the fight is, well over. There's nothing left for the beast to rive. So the fight is over. Luckily, M is safe with Welly. I did my job. I turn to reassure the young people that I have their safety. Welly's eyes meet mine with hurt and concern, which makes my belly enter my throat. He holds the Count's daughter in his arms as blood spews forth from her mouth. The quarrel from her father's shot has
finally found the end of its journey, lodged in her chest. Her eyes, her innocent eyes look mystified. She cannot understand what is happening. She does not know that she is dying. "Help her! Help her!" shouts Welly. Only now do I realize that he's shouting for me to help. I wander forward and hold the boy and the young girl for a moment in my loving embrace. I then take her gently from him, peeling his arms from around her, his brave, strong arms. He sits to the ground holding himself, rocking back and forth, giving himself a reassuring hug while I look at the girl to measure her injuries. The arrow is stuck deep into her chest. Her breathing is raspy as her lungs fill with her heart's blood. She looks so questioning at me. In her eyes I can see the fear and the pain of her death. She holds on to me with a strength you would not warrant in a girl of her size. She mouths words I cannot hear. I take my ear closer to her, but still there is nothing. "There, there, little one," I tell her as I stroke her forehead. I use the material of her headdress to wipe the blood from her mouth. This is a last moment where her body grasps onto her life. Her muscles tense as she struggles, but the blood that she has lost means that she is too weak to hold on. She goes limp in my arms. Well, he bursts at my feet. The tears and the tantrum he has betray his lack of seeing death. He beats his fists upon the floor. For those of us that meet death regularly, this is a much less bitter pill. But it is a pill that I would rather not have to swallow. I mean, she was no beauty, but she was a rare thing. She was loved and cherished by a proud father, more than many were, more than I ever was. My father despises me. I lay the small body on the table and bow my head for a moment in a silent prayer. I wish a safe journey into the next world and hope she does not remember the pain that she felt leaving this one. Well, he is still a small ball of hurt on the floor. He rocks back and forth and shakes. I open my eyes to her blood-stained face and reach to close her eyes with two gentle fingers. I hope beyond all hope that her father had no idea that he'd caused her death. Would he wake up in hell and be tormented for this for eternity? Or would he go to heaven where he would be helped by the host to deal with what he did? I hope heaven greeted him and her. Eventually, I look up from my prayers to see my two fine fellows there with us. William now in his human shape, Gervais stroking the fine blonde hair of the young girl. Oh, how we feel for her. We feel... Gervais? Oh, a golden fleece of sorts, William. And then, to my dismay, William cuts her head off.
William. Let us move to when I returned home to the Chateau de Tonquéville. I walked into the Lord de Tonquéville's reception room. It was a large, imposing room with huge, rich tapestries and all the fixings of a wealthy nobleman. He was reading and busy, and I thought that I would make a statement. I threw the sack that was in my hand on the table in front of the Lord de Tonquéville. It was a somewhat bloody sack. Well, it was actually a very bloody sack and the source of a vile stench after its weeks on the road. It bounced with a thud, leaving a bloody and worse trail where it had made contact with the wood of the tabletop. My lord looked up and then a little affronted at this. I had probably been a bit too daring to do the throwing. It seemed like an impressive manner of bringing him up the news, but, well...
For God's sakes, Will, what is this?
Asked de Tonquerville. His anger was apparent. Yes, by his tone, I had undoubtedly done the wrong thing here.
It is the golden fleece that I got as a reward for my effort,
I said as I approached the dais where he sat.
I agree it is not as beautiful as we thought, or perhaps as golden at the moment, but it was as close to the fleece as we could get.
I sat on the edge of his table while he stared at the bloody bag before him.
Why so bloody?
De Tonquerville asked, running a finger through the blood track that the bag had left, then lifting that digit and showing me the mess on its tip. I tried to show a little contrition with my look. Seemed like the right thing to do, all things considered.
Well, it was a bloody awful mission,
I replied, trying to make jest of the situation. It did not work. My lord harumphed his disapproval while he stared at me sitting on the edge of his table. It took a while for me to realize that he did not want me to sit on the edge of his table, and it was with little embarrassment in front of his guards that I removed myself from it and took a couple of steps back before facing him again, while sorting my surcoat nervously. Eventually, the old man's grey eyebrows unknotted, and he nodded his approval at me. You have to remember I was young at this point and sometimes overstepped my boundaries. I should really listen to Fenrir. I really should. The men behind him were smirking whilst holding attention. My behavior seemed to have reached an acceptable level. Eventually, with his disapproval evident, he opened the bag and he looked inside. He stared at its contents for a while, trying to figure out what it was. His face changed to a look of surprise, and then utter disgust. He stood up quickly, his seat shooting backwards from beneath him, and with a flash of anger on his face, he shot me a stare that knocked me a little with its violence.
What is the meaning of this?
He demanded.
I am afraid that this is the golden fleece that we took from your so-called friend, the Comte du Périgord, after killing his dragon for him.
I told the man.
He refused us the actual fleece, so this was his daughter's golden fleece.
I smiled. It had seemed a much more amusing thing when I'd thought it up.
In all the hells, William! You did not! You did not!
He yelled. His disgust was apparent.
No, actually. The Count killed her himself, accidentally, and I thought this would have been a good idea as a witty joke, my lord. Although now I see that it was not.
I was now considering my witty choice as an ill one.
That fine man is a dear friend of mine, William,
he told me. I looked at the floor as he scrutinized me.
Oh, no, he is not,
I whispered.
What?
I shuffled my feet and nodded, looking up to meet those furious eyes, and I shrugged. He cast himself into his chair, not able to look at me. I stepped forward now. I felt I needed to explain this a little.
We killed the dragon as requested,
I told him.
The Count then decided he was not going to give us anything and exclude us from his court. His intention for us was to die in order for his retinue of knights to see the dragon and know how to kill it. We were not supposed to live against that worm. So we killed the worm, which I hasten to add was no mean undertaking, and we went back to him for the fleece. He refused and tried to get one of his men, to kill me, a man by the name of Bruce Delalay, also known as the Dueling Duke and the Gauntlet of Fury. I expected my Lord de Tonqueville to know who I was talking about, but he just looked at me and shrugged.
And?
Well, he was a really good fighter, and I bloody killed him, I did.
I smiled. Still no niceties fell from my lord's lips.
Then he tried to kill us with guards, he did. Knights and crossbowmen, too. It was at least 100 to 3.
Well, 4 if you include my squire Llewellyn. We call him Welly. I told him.
100 against 3? And a little boy? And yet here you stand?
He said, stroking his beard.
This sounds like utter nonsense, William. What are you going to tell me next? You killed everybody in the court?
I nodded, then rapidly shook my head. This seemed like it needed to be more genuine. Why would they have run if we were so outmanned? He cocked his head in a question.
They bloody did,
I said in a childish manner.
and that I killed everyone who was left, I did.
I said as quick as I could, looking at my toes and describing a circle with them on his rug. I felt the quicker I could say it, the less time he would have to scrutinize the feasibility of this statement.
I left the Count and his daughter alive, I did, but the Count bloody shot me here in the shoulder with a crossbow.
I pointed at a very uninjured shoulder.
It passed right through and struck his daughter in the chest, and that is why her head is in the bag. You know, blonde hair, golden fleece.
The Count still stroked his beard in consideration of me.
You seem to be bearing no wound now, William,
he pointed out.
Ah, yes, my lord. It was a mere flesh wound.
I lied.
So what of the Count?
My lord asked.
I sort of killed him.
To death, I replied.
Do you not know how bloody implausible this sounds to me, William? It sounds wrong to my ears.
He paused. Listening to myself, he was right. I seemed implausible.
I guess then you're telling me you just fought yourself clear of the castle and came home, I suppose, yes?
Yes. You understand, Lord?
I said.
And I suppose you did it all as this bloody demon wolf thing that I heard you become.
He asked. A light was in his eyes. A light of knowing. How in heaven did everyone know that I was blessed in this way? Fenrir and I had hidden it so well throughout our years. Would I lie? Again, I felt embarrassed as I looked at the floor, slightly annoyed at my lack of knowing. Yes? I admitted.
I need you to answer me truly. Are you an unholy thing, William?
The question was sincere and crucial to the man. He leaned forward and held my eyes. If I looked away in answer, it would be done. I would be done. I would be lost. And so, I held his gaze, I did. This was the most important answer I could ever give.
We, my angel and I, are trying to be the most devout beings we can be, my lord. We may fail at times, but no more than any other man.
I said, holding his eye. He held mine. It was a while as he looked into me in consideration. Finally, he nodded, and that was it. A simple nod that gave me all the knowledge, all the acceptance, that was needed.
Then sit with me, William. More wine, more wine,
he commanded. And with that, the chapter was done.